Hytale is a game for both adventure and creative play. Hytale blends the freedom of a sandbox with the momentum of a roleplay game. Explore a procedurally generated world full of dungeons, secrets, and a variety of creatures, then shape it block by block. And that is the website's description of Hytale. In the game, there are so many more hidden features that many of you guys don't even know, and a lot of you might even be new fans that are just experiencing the game for its first time right now. Now that we have an official launch and release date, I want to talk about 50 things about the Hytale lore that you most likely don't know, because let me tell you guys, there is a lot of lore to this game that I absolutely love, and I can't wait to dig into this. My name is Chris, welcome back to the Canadian Flash channel, and enjoy the video. Let's start this off from the beginning, and I'm going to talk about Gaia. If you don't know who Gaia is the main good guy in the Hytale story, and Gaia is worshipped by many of the factions in the game, and concept arts do show that Gaia was worshipped long before us as avatars entered the world of Orbis. We can see that with a bunch of Gaia statues all over the world, and for example, another concept art like the Temple of Gaia. Confirmed factions that are worshippers of Gaia in Hytale at the moment are the Kweebecs and the Varyns. And us as an avatar, I would assume that we are also going to be one of the worshippers of Gaia, to say the least. There are elements and hints of Gaia throughout the world of Orbis, as there are specific Gaia symbols. In the iconography, there is what looks to be a tree of life, or kind of like a tree that branches out into separate elements, which is the representation of Gaia throughout the world of Orbis. If you see these specific runes in Hytale, it represents that there is the presence of Gaia. From the olden days, there are also specific warriors or a faction of humans that used to worship Gaia, or just be the knights of Gaia, for example, and they are called the Orbis officers, and we can see that from a concept art, the Tessa and Kairos concept art, that has the Orbis officer sword and shield. We don't know if there's any current alive Orbis officers in the game at the moment, but in the past there certainly was a whole knight faction, I would say, of Orbis officers. If Gaia is the all things good, then Varyn is the all things evil. From what we know, Varyn is the, like I said, evil in Hytale. We don't know anything about Varyn, where he came from, what his story is, or why he's trying to take over the world of Orbis, but all we know is that we have to stop him. Just like Gaia, Varyn has his own symbols, and you can see in the iconography, the Varyn mark, also in brackets known as the evil, is the sort of diamond rune over here. Then there is also the evil contained, not sure what the contained part of that means, but it looks, there's a couple lines going across, or going around the little diamond from Varyn. So if you see these symbols, kind of similar to the Gaia symbols. For example, you'll see these on the Outlanders. They represents that there is a presence of Varyn, or for example, Varyn's magic, or whatever Varyn is kind of present in this one area. Keeping on the topic of Varyn, there are creatures that you will encounter in Hytale called void creatures. For example, the void eyes, the void spawns, even crawlers. I would even consider the Outlanders to be part of this. There's also in concept arts the void spider, and in concept arts the void dragon. Don't know what they are, probably going to be future bosses in Hytale, but like I said, these guys are controlled by Varyn. We don't know how or what really possesses them, but either way, Varyn has his own specific mobs that kind of worship him, kind of like the way the Kweebecs and the Varyns worship Gaia. The Outlanders I mentioned a little bit earlier have Varyn markings all over them, and it's kind of cool seeing that. It's kind of cool seeing that Varyn has his own, I guess, faction, which you can call it, which is called the Outlanders. As you can tell, they have diamonds all over them, and they use some sort of Varyn magic, or some sort of watery, voidish magic to kind of make these big colossal creatures, and to do their special rituals and spells that we have no idea what they do. And it would be kind of cool to see what these Outlanders do with these spells. Can they revive the dead? Can they create void creatures? We don't really know, but that's a really cool part of the lore that I would love to explore. Heading over to Zone 2 now, probably my favorite lore to talk about in Hytale, and this is going to be the lore between the Scaraks and the Varyns. If you did not know, the Scaraks used to enslave the Varyns, hence by this one concept art over here. It looks like a Scarak is kind of holding a Varyn by the chain over here, and the Scarak and the Varyn looks like it is trying to mine or build something. In my opinion, I think the Varyns built the ziggurats, and then the Scaraks kind of moved into those ziggurats, but I'm not too sure. It's kind of hard to tell. But that's just my little opinion on it. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Another thing I find very intriguing about the Scaraks, or just Zone 2 and the Ziggurats in general, is in the Sand Palace. And then under the Sand Palace, there's a text in the concept art that says, underground, a big magic gate leads to the instance where the Sand Empress is imprisoned. Who is the Sand Empress? What is the Sand Empress? We have no idea. But there is, going back to the iconography, a marking for the Sand Empress, and it kind of looks, it's a bug-like looking creature, so it leads me to believe that it is a Scarak. But why would these Scaraks, who I believe are the people who are the faction that kind of runs the Ziggurats, why would they enslave one of their own? There must be some sort of hidden lore behind there, and I guess we got to get into Hytale to figure it out. Staying on the topic of Ziggurats, you can see that in all the Ziggurats there is a crystal room. What does this crystal do? We don't really know, but all of the Scaraks in Hytale have these sort of these blue glowing antenna, and it kind of seems like a way that they communicate with each other, either telepathically or whatever. I wonder if this crystal is going to be that same shade of blue, and I wonder if you destroy that crystal, maybe all of the Scaraks, whether they're mind controlled or not, will either die or, for example, lose their mind control. We don't really know, but there is a crystal in the middle of the Ziggurats that I would assume is either the ultimate treasure or some sort of way to defeat the Scaraks entirely. Going back to the topic of the slavery between the Scaraks and the Farrens, did you know that the Farrens also wear freedom bracers on them? They are the little bracelet that you can see this baby Farren, or for example this other Farren in the concept art, are wearing on their ankles and on their wrists. And these freedom bracers are traditionally worn by all Farren to remind them of their past slavery. Each piece is engraved with the wind symbol, which also means freedom. And if you do not know, the wind element is the element of Zone 2, and that's exactly where the Farrens and Scaraks take place, and the wind element also means freedom. I've talked a lot about the world of Orbis, but did you know there's also 4 other planets in Hytale that we know absolutely nothing about? There is a planet that is close to Orbis called Numdrazzle that has a very bright top to the planet and a very dark bottom. Not sure what's going on there. There is my favorite planet called Ballin, obviously it's clearly what it's called. It is a fiery, completely destroyed looking planet. There's a planet called Karpak, which is a swampy, sandy looking planet, not really too sure. And then there is what I would like to call a Varyn planet, which is Nexus, which just looks basically like the Void. We don't really know what it is or how are we going to get to any of these planets. But yeah, they are there. Well, so that's part of the lore. In Zone 1, there is a sort of a rivalry between the two sentient factions, the Kweebec and the Chorks. We do know that the Kweebecs get kind of captured sometimes by the Chorks, and we gotta set them free. We don't know why the Chorks do that. Maybe the Kweebecs possess some cool knowledge that the Chorks would like to know. But in the game of Hytale, we're gonna have to probably side with the Kweebecs, save them from the Chorks. I feel like that's gonna be a little side quest that we're gonna have to do. And yeah, we're gonna have to figure out why the Chorks or defeat the Chorks. You know, some sort of lore like that is really cool in Hytale, and I would love to get to the bottom of it. The Kweebec lore is quite interesting and has gone through quite a few changes over time. In one of the most recent blog posts, the Hytale team confirms the actual life cycle of a Kweebec, and I think Simon is going to try to adopt this version of the Kweebecs in the game, so I want to talk about this. So Kweebecs begin as seedlings, dropping from the branches of the elders that reside at the heart of their villages, like real seeds. Young Kweebecs contain a lot of potential, and seedlings are particularly energetic, rushing around and often getting themselves into trouble. This exuberance matures into eagerness and adventure. Young Kweebecs roam beyond their villages in search for new skills and knowledge, learning about themselves in the process. These are the Kweebecs you already know, young tree folk on their way becoming rooted elders or sage tree singers. But they skipped a step. This is really cool. When a young Kweebec returns to the villages, they mature into a form that reflects all that they've learned about Orbis and themselves in the course of their adventure. Taking on new responsibilities, they become artisans, cultivators, and sometimes warriors that the village needs. So Kweebecs kind of go on like their own little training arc, and I'm sorry for this point taking a little bit longer than the other points, but it is super cool. You can see the images and concept arts of what these Kweebecs can look like, and I cannot wait for Simon to add these to the game because they are super cool, especially for the main creature in Hytale. The life cycle of a Scarak is also pretty cool as well, and in another recent blog post they did talk about the new version of Scaraks, but I don't think Simon is adopting that version of the Scaraks into the game, so I'm going to talk about the original concept of the Scaraks. So they start off as eggs. They start off as egg sacs, and then they eventually hatch or whatever, and whatever bugs do, turn into a larva. Then from there, they can either evolve into a tank, a locust, a worker, or a warrior. There are 4 different types of Scaraks that you'll probably encounter in the caves or the dungeons or the Scarak nests or ziggurats of Zone 2. Then, after that, it seems like there is a boss, I would call it, called the Broodmother, which is pretty cool, and that is the boss that I guess spawns in all the egg sacs and all that. But then there is also the Sand Empress. We have no idea what that is, but I feel like it's going to be a Scarak. Could be possibly a Varyn, but it kind of seems like it is going to be a Scarak. I mentioned the iconography a couple times already for the Varyn marks and the Gaia marks, but there actually are marks all over the iconography for other factions in Hytale. Like I said, there's the Varyn mark and the Gaia mark, but there are also the marks of the Trorks, which are these kind of like jagged little curves and lines, which is pretty cool. There's a mark for the Pharens, which kind of looks like a little smiley face. There's the Sand Empress, which I mentioned before. There is the markings of the Slothians, which I have yet to talk about. And there's also a secret faction that we only have one confirmed image of ever in Hytale, called the Fawns, which seems to be the main combatants to the Outlanders in Zone 3. So if you're traveling into caves or dungeons or wherever you are in any of the zones where these factions take place, be sure to take a look out on the walls or anything or anywhere around there for these ruins, which will probably tell you that there are this faction nearby. So this is a really cool one, and this is not confirmed at all, but I think it's all but confirmed that the Fawns, which is the faction I mentioned before, and the Outlanders, who I also mentioned before, have some sort of beef. And we've only been confirmed of one Fawn picture ever in Hytale, so it leads me to believe that maybe the Outlanders almost, if not did already, completely just make the Fawns go extinct. I don't know what the lore is between the two, but they seem like they are the most sentient beings in Zone 3. The Outlanders are the bad guys, and I would assume the Fawns are the good guys, and something must have happened to maybe eliminate the Fawns from Hytale, but they seems like they are making a comeback, so we'll just have to see. I mentioned this before, but Gaia has her own temple, and in the concept art of this temple, you can see that in the top left, Gaia is kind of sleeping or dead on this sort of crystal. We don't know why this really happened, but it's kind of the heart of the temple of Gaia, honestly. You can see around there are pillars of the lightning, the fire, the water, the wind, and the earth elements, which is pretty cool. But like I said, we don't know why she's in this temple or how she's in this temple, but it's definitely one of the biggest mysteries in the lore of Hytale. Hytale seems to have elemental themed portals, kind of taking a look at this dungeon entrance research concept art, which if you take a look at this, I see two of them from actually, honestly, three of them from Zone 3. Well, one of them looks like a sky island from Zone 2. One of them looks like a lava entrance from Zone 4. And then we have some sort of void entrance. Don't know how these play a role in the story or the lore of Hytale, but we do know the elements play a big part, and I would assume all these dungeons play a big part in Hytale as well. I mentioned the elements quite a bit in the last two points, but did you know that Hytale actually has 6 elements in the game? Zone 1 is represented by the element of earth. Zone 2 is represented by the element of wind. Zone 3 is represented by the element of water. Zone 4 is represented by the element of fire. Yet to be confirmed, a Zone 5, most likely, not confirmed yet, going to be representing the element of lightning. And then there is a 6th element, which is void, which I would assume is an element that Varyn is bringing into the game of Hytale. We just don't know anything about it yet. How do you harness the power of void? Who really knows? Going along with the elements, each zone seems to have their own sort of element circle with the crystal of the element kind of in it. We've seen Zone 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3 element circles. We have yet to see a Zone 4 fire element circle, but we have a concept art for it, and we've seen absolutely nothing about an elemental crystal for the void and the lightning element. But I would assume you probably take this crystal, put it into this portal that takes you to the Temple of Gaia. Once you have all of them, that portal will, I guess, open, and then, like I said, you will be transported most likely to the Temple of Gaia somehow. If you like villagers in Minecraft, then the Klops are probably the guy for you. The Klops are what we call a wandering trader of Hytale. I would assume you can give this guy, like, I don't know, trades or whatever. He kind of goes around. Their Klops are kind of around the world of Orbis, and they make their own little hidey holes, as this concept art says. There is a living room, there is a kitchen, and there is a cellar and a secret chest. I would assume maybe you can rob this guy if you really wanted to, or maybe make a deal with him and you can get some pretty cool, maybe rare items. I mentioned the Void Spider a little bit early on, but in my opinion, I think the biggest boss in Zone 1 is going to be the Void Spider. Right now, currently, the Void Spider is not in the game, but I think Simon does have plans to add this spider into the game, as it has a massive, massive concept art called the Emerald Grove Dungeon Boss void spider. I would assume this guy's clearly corrupted by Varyn and probably puts out little spiders absolutely everywhere. Super cool boss. Can't wait to actually fight it in the game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun whenever it does release. Probably going to be a future DLC now that I know it's not officially in the game right now, but still super cool nonetheless. Another one of my favorite pieces of lore to talk about is the lore between Tessa and Kairos. I'm going to talk about Tessa first. Tessa seems like the good guy Orbis officer in Hytale. Don't know if she's actually currently alive, or maybe we'll see her in a memory mirror, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But Tessa seems like the good guy, good character in Hytale. Probably represents Gaia the most out of everybody. That's really all we know. Then there is Kairos. Kairos is a very cool, kind of Darth Vader looking guy. I would assume probably a fallen Orbis officer, maybe was taken over or corrupted by Varyn. Look at the sword he's got. It's got like some sort of purple magic, also got some sort of green magic on the alternate color. Those are both Varyn colors. He's got purple eyes. I would assume Varyn eyes. His alternative mask has green eyes, like I said. Those are Varyn colors, but he does have the Orbis officer symbol on his chest, so it leads me to believe that Kairos and Tessa, probably they were generals in the Orbis officer army or something like that. One stayed good, one fell, kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker. So pretty cool. Can't wait to discover their story. We've actually had a glimpse of what the Temple of Gaia looks like, and one was even in the trailer where there was a quest to actually kill to kill the corrupted golem or something like that. But we see a image of the Temple of Gaia with a corrupted golem in him, and there is actually a sword, which in my opinion looks very similar to the sword of Kairos. It looks like a void sword. It's clearly stuck in the back of this golem, and it is definitely corrupted with Varyn magic or void magic, which is pretty cool. The lore behind this seems very interesting. Can't wait to discover it. But I wonder how the heck this sword got in the back of this corrupted golem. I mentioned this earlier about the Temple of Gaia, and like, why is Gaia dead? Why is she just kind of floating there in like a little cocoon inside the Temple of Gaia? We don't really know. I would assume it has to do with Varyn magic. Maybe he completely sucked all of the life out of like Gaia or whatever, and our job as players in Hytale is to revive the elements in the game, stop Varyn's corruption in Hytale, and bring Gaia and Gaia's aura back to the world of Orbis. I think that could be really cool, and maybe even save all 5 of the Ultraverses at this point as well, because Numdrazzle looks like it's half corrupted as well. Nexus looks like long gone, Torbalin looks destroyed, and Karpak just looks like a regular planet, but who knows what's really in it. The Chorks are a really cool faction in Zone 1 that have different types of Chorks in them. So there is a Chork Shaman, which has a sort of yellow crystal. To me, kind of looks like a lightning crystal. I would assume it's going to be the more of the mage / healing Chork of them all. Then there is the Chork Warrior. Chork Warrior looks really cool. The Chork Hunter, which is really cool as well. Yeah, the Chork Hunter is also accompanied with a wolf to help it in its hunting duties. And then there's also the Chork Sentry, which I would assume is the most base Chork of them all. Kind of like the Scouting Chork, which is pretty cool. And then there is also a Boss Chork, if you want to call it. And this is the Chieftain. The biggest, the strongest, the coolest looking Chork of them all. That's also Hugo's profile picture, which is pretty cool. You can see it's got this really cool sword that has actually Chork runes on them, like I talked about a little bit earlier on. You can see it has the Chork logos on them. So we just got this image recently, and it is the Storm Leather and the Void Heart, and I kind of want to talk about and tie them into Zone 5 and Zone 6. I would assume that you get the Storm Leather from something from Zone 5 and the Void Heart from something from Zone 6. But then Simon just mentioned that the Storm Leather comes from an ancient gateway, and it leads me to believe that this portal is kind of this little floating island looking one that we saw in the dungeon entrances concept art, which is possible. I would assume it's probably looks a lot different than what it does now, but I wonder if these portals can lead you to specific items that can help you craft better weapons later on in the game, which is pretty cool. There's also the Void Heart. A lot of theories are going around that you just got to kill like void spawns, maybe the Void Dragon, maybe the Void Spider, any sort of void creature. Maybe you have a percentage chance to drop the Void Heart, which could be pretty cool as well. Also ties into the Void lore as well. Not really sure how much of a lore thing this is, but it has to do with dungeons. Did you know that dungeons have lanterns around them, or for example, like, I guess little fire things? They're called lanterns in the game, and if you haven't explored this dungeon before, then the lanterns actually glow orange or red, which is pretty cool. And then once you actually complete the dungeon, they glow, they actually glow like a different color. For example, they would glow like blue or green, maybe, to say that you completed this dungeon, which is pretty cool to see, and maybe it stops you from actually entering the same dungeon a couple couple times. Also in dungeons, they actually have a door on them as well, which only opens once for the first time the player arrives, and then it stays open until I guess you complete the dungeon, which is pretty cool. Kind of reminds me of solo leveling in a sense. We're finally getting to talk about the Slothians because we actually have some information about the Slothians now, which is pretty cool. We do have the runes in the iconography, so clearly they are a big faction in the game because only really the big main factions in the game get these sort of runes. And Slothians are a very cool creature that live in the Forgotten Jungle in Zone 4, which is super cool. It's kind of underground in Zone 4. I absolutely love the Slothians. I think they're really cool. And they have this kind of bamboo-ish looking armor, which is very interesting because what do they really have to fight in the Forgotten Jungle? And obviously, that's the dinosaurs and the other dinosaurs, basically, and maybe the other faction in Zone 4, which we know absolutely nothing about, but either way, Slothian, super cool creature, can't wait to discover their lore. I mentioned earlier that the element of wind, kind of engraved anywhere, kind of exemples freedom, and I mentioned that with the Varens, but did you also know that the Kweebecs also have these elements of wind engraved inside of stones as well? And I just kind of noticed this when I was making this video. So does this hint that the Kweebecs were once also enslaved by the Chorks? I wonder, because in this concept art it says engraved stone with the symbol wind rune, which is kind of interesting because this would make no sense to be in Zone 1 because that's where the Kweebecs really are. But like I said, the element of wind also means freedom. So I wonder if the Kweebecs used to be enslaved by the Chorks. And they also use this wind rune, and it represents like their freedom from the Chorks, which is pretty cool. I mentioned this creature a little bit earlier on, and you also see it in the trailer. There is a Void Dragon. I would assume the Void Dragon wasn't always like a very bad guy, but clearly Buddy got corrupted by Varyn, and you can see in the trailer, it is a super cool boss. Looks oddly similar to the Ender Dragon Hytale, but either way, we don't know anything about the Void Dragon. All we know is that it was in the trailer, and there's some cool looking concept arts for it. But yeah, Void Dragon, it's certainly going to be a boss. Did you know that the Varens also make statues for Gaia? You can see in the Gaia concept art that there is a Varen made, I guess it's a wood carving of Gaia. You can see it kind of has these little Varen ears on the top of it, which is really cool. Cool to see that this other faction besides the Kweebecs also worship Gaia as well. Speaking of that, I like to say that the Kweebecs also worship Gaia. You can tell they make their own Gaia statues made out of their ancestral wood, and it says Kweebecs carve effigies in pieces of wood they gather from ancient trees. The statue is both the likeness of their goddess and formed from the wood of their ancestor, making it very precious to the Kweebecs. And I would say that the Kweebecs are the faction, maybe besides the humans, that are actually closest to Gaia. Speaking of Gaia, let's take a look at what the clothing of Gaia means. The white parts of Gaia's, I guess, dress or robe symbolize the light, the primary element of Gaia. The green on Gaia's dress represents the nature of Orbis. For example, like the Kweebecs, the trees, and all that. And the 5 pearls in her hair obviously represent all 5 of the main elements in Hytale, which is wind, fire, water, earth, and lightning. I mentioned the Sand Empress just a little bit, and back in the day, there is a image on the Scarak concept art saying that old shield Scarak that was used by Empress to fight opponent and move heavy construction walls. So clearly the Sand Empress, I would assume after reading this, is some sort of Scarak, and now obviously she's in jail for some reason. I would assume maybe the Sand Empress was not the kindest, for example, to all of its workers. You can see that it has a chain on it, this sort of tank Scarak, and it looks very beaten and very damaged. So I would assume maybe the Sand Empress committed treason against these Scaraks, and that's why she is in prison. But it's really cool to see the Sand Empress also mentioned once again, minus just in that Ziggurat concept art as well. There is a concept art of the Varyn spawn sketches, and yes, it's pretty cool. These things look like that image of Varyn, which is very interesting. But there is something that I like to look in this a lot, and I actually made a podcast about this back in the day. Check out the Hytale podcast. There is an anti-grav arm. I wonder if Varyn has some sort of anti-gravity powers that we really don't know about. And that's the only reference it's ever had in this one tiny little sketch where the arm is held together by gravity. But maybe that helps. Maybe that's some sort of power that Varyn has. Maybe that's what brought the Ultraverses together, because it's got some sort of gravity likeness to it. But that's pretty cool in my opinion. Goblins are kind of like the scavengers of Hytale, and this is confirmed by some concept art saying that goblins make kind of dens in human remains. We've also noticed this before in some videos and images or whatever, that goblins kind of make settlements in sort of like old Orbis officer camps or whatever, which is pretty cool. So if you ever run across what looks to be a like rundown facility or building in Hytale or prefab or whatever, it might be inhabited by a gang of goblins, which could be pretty cool. Did you know that the Outlander Shaman lives in the tallest building in the Outlander Village, which is pretty cool. If you ever want to do a speedrun in Outlander Village and probably want to take out the strongest Outlander that's not the chief, go straight for the tallest building. You will find the Outlander Shaman and it'll probably shoot some spells at you, so good luck. Outlanders also have their specific pools where they do rituals in them. In the concept art, it's kind of like a purpley water, which is pretty cool. And then recently we actually got an image from the Hytale team of one of these rituals actually taking place. I would assume it's a regular Outlander being placed in there and then getting turned into this like Colossus-y Outlander looking thing, but we don't really know, and I really would want to know more about that. Hytale also has special flowers, which is kind of interesting. In the Hytale concept art for plants, if you zoom in a little bit, there are 3 types of special flowers. Don't really know what they are, what they're going to do, what kind of special powers they possess, but there are special flowers in Hytale, so that is very neat in my opinion. I would assume it's for some sort of alchemy or something, but either way, could be really cool to find out one day. I can't believe I waited this long to talk about it, but Hytale does have memory mirrors, and it looks like these memory mirrors can be found in these sort of temples that you can see in Zone 1. Maybe you'll find these in Zone 2, but if they have a Gaia symbol at the front of them that has like maybe a little spherical looking top, make sure you go inside, go to the bottom. There could potentially, I'm not going to say it's confirmed, be a memory mirror that probably is going to give you past lore that went on in Hytale. We can see examples of one that looks like it's in a Zone 3 waterish looking temple. And then the other 2 kind of look like ones that are made in Zone 1, maybe one in Zone 2. So go take a look for temples in your favorite zone, and maybe you'll find some specific memory mirrors that tell you about the area or past lore of Hytale, which is super cool. Undead creatures like skeletons and zombies have blue glowing eyes, and in my opinion, that is to represent the undead faction. So yes, another faction in the game of Hytale to go along with the Kweebecs, to go along with the Varyns, to go along with the Scaraks, you know, all those other creatures as well. Super cool. If you see anything with blue glowing eyes that are not the Scaraks, it's most likely an undead creature that's probably going to try to attack you. Staying on the eye topic, did you know that all of the mobs that have any connection or any sort of alliance or allegiance with Varyn have these green glowing eyes? Take a look at the Outlanders, take a look at the Crawlers, take a look at the Void Eyes, take a look at the Void Spawn. Basically anything that has to do with Varyn has these green glowing eyes, shows that they are either controlled or corrupted by Varyn, which is super cool. We don't know how they get corrupted, but they just are. And last but certainly not least, there is a biome in Hytale called the Scorched Ruins, and there is some pretty cool lore behind this biome. We saw it in a blog post back in the day, and it says, these ruins are depleted human structures where torches still burn, providing an eerie atmosphere as players investigate what happened to the inhabitants, with some containing lore or hidden dungeons, which is super cool. I can't wait to discover the lore of the Scorched Ruins, but what really intrigues me is where it says that the torches still burn. So, is there, for example, maybe a survivor of what happened to the Scorched Ruins? We don't really know, but it would be really cool to find out on January 13th, 2025 when Hytale's coming out. And if you guys want to see more Hytale content like this from me, let me know in the comment section down below. Please hit that like button and subscribe. I'm trying to reach 10K before the game drops. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Comment Scarak Worker if you are still here, and I'll see you guys in the next one.